everybody. Welcome to the second Counseling Black Women Presents Roundtable Talk. Today we're talking about Black love, and so happy to have so many esteemed colleagues here and ready to dive in and talk about what Black love means to us. I'm Dr. Kimber Shelton. I'm a licensed counseling psychologist in Dallas, Texas, and I am the co-editor of a handbook on counseling African American women. In terms of my relationship status, I have been married to my spouse for 8 years this year.
I can go next. So I am Ayanna Abrams. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in Atlanta, Georgia. I have a solo mental health practice called Ascension Behavioral Health, and I contributed to a chapter on couple and family therapy with African American women. And in terms of I'm trying to make this a short story. So I'm currently partnered. It's been about 4.5 years. And we met in high school, and then we're not in contact for about 18 years, and then ran into each other. And here we are 4.5 years later. But we have been together. We have no children, but we are parents of a cat.
Welcome. Thank you, Ayanna.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Lynn. I'm a licensed counseling psychologist here in the state of Georgia. I am the director of the Counseling Center at Oglethorpe University, and I also have a small private practice as well. I contributed to the book as one of the co-editors, as well as co-authoring the chapter on individual counseling and therapy, and writing the chapter on group counseling with African American women. I've been with my spouse for a very long time. Similar to Ayanna, we met in high school, but we didn't start dating until we were in college, and then dated for several years, but all together. We've been together for about 30 years now. Including 25 years of marriage. So we have a long history to draw from. So yeah, that's me.
Okay, before we introduce our special guest, since everyone has these high school love stories, let me just say that my spouse and I went to the same high school together, but he's older than I am, so we weren't really hanging out together. And then about 20 years later, we reconnected and are now together. So I like all this high school love. Okay. And then we have the special guest with us today, Tia Williams.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tia Williams. I use she, they pronouns. Very interesting that y'all have high school loves. Did y'all know that before today?
No.
Okay. I am a student affairs professional. I'm the assistant director at the Center for Women at Emory, and I'm also a social worker. As far as relationship status, I've been in a queer relationship for 2 years as of this year, or this month, I mean.
Okay, happy anniversary. Well, so when we're thinking about Black love and sharing our own stories about Black love, just curious for all of us here today, what is it that you love about Black love?
I think for me, it a lot has to do with the shared history, different cultural aspects that are just very familiar. Even if your backgrounds are different, there tends to be a shared history around family dynamics that are connected to the experience of being marginalized, and how that may have led to closer family ties, or ways that we bond tightly in our families, and work together to deal with a lot of those challenges and adversity. So that's one thing that comes up for me, and just the ways that we overcome, and how that happens in the context of love relationships and partner relationships, and how we just find strength in those relationships to, you know, to go on another day, you know, as we deal with different challenges. So I think that history and that dynamic, you know, is part and parcel with Black love. Yeah, that's just the initial thought that I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I agree with all the things that you're saying. It's nice to be with someone who culturally, even though there's a lot of diversity in Black culture and Black identity, culturally, there's just certain things that we can get. Unfortunately, one of those things being racism, oppression, but not having to explain that and it just kind of be known. But I appreciate the second part of what you're saying, not just connecting around the oppression piece, but also connecting around the strength and the resiliency and the healing piece and being able to turn to another Black person for that. And I just think that collective history is so important. And it's one of the reasons why Black love is really important to me, that we couldn't always choose our partners, that who we were to be with was decided for us, and it wasn't based on love or interest or familiarity. It was based on, I need more people to work on this plantation, so the two of you get paired together. And that the fear that our ancestors had of loving, because your love could be stolen from you, could be taken away from you. So it's so important now to be able to love and to be able to choose who you love, and coming from that same collective history, the strength of being able to connect with someone who has that same history and is choosing to also be with you.
I agree with all of that. One thing I will say is that I think Blackness is beautiful. Like, there's a wide array of people and shared experiences. And so that has always drawn me to it as well. It's just, I think Black women are beautiful. But also, like, I think one of the first times I really appreciated the relationship that I have was during the George Floyd stuff. And so having a kindred feeling about what was going on, and, you know, in certain spaces we could be together and talk about it versus in other spaces and actually understand what was going on and how we each felt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted to pair with what everyone was, you know, already sharing, that there's something that feels pretty special and unique about being able to access a certain kind of love. I think it has like a different kind of power to it. I think it has a different depth to it when you've had to, you know, one, maybe create it from, you know, circumstances, or not having, you know, certain circumstances and examples of it. But then it also, there's something that feels really special about being able to remember the humanity of love when it's been stripped from us, to be able to say, oh no, this is a part of us. We were able to access this until it was taken away from us. So when I see love and loving relationships and all the different layers and nuances of it and how it shows up in certain relationships, it's also that reminder of the humanity. I think that always feels most important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. The humanity, going back to Tia, what you were saying, that Black is beautiful. Agree. Just Blackness is beautiful. And thinking specifically of Black men, beautiful. And I think about how our Black men are treated in this society. And there's something very beautiful about being able to pour love into a Black person, where we know that they're not always treated in humane ways. They're not always seen. They're not always cared for. And being able to provide that. And I think you said it so beautifully too, just that sacred love. Mm-hmm. So in developing your ideas of love, what did you see in your community that told you what relationships mean?
Implicitly or explicitly?
Both.
I got a whole bunch of mixed messages. I am from a Caribbean family, and my parents and my siblings are Caribbean and English immigrants. So one thing that was instilled in me, which doesn't, I think, show up in me in the ways in which my family would have expected, is that you get married, you have children, like it was very rigid. There's rules to this, and a lot of it rooted in Christianity. So those were things that were kind of instilled and kind of named, like I said, implicitly and explicitly. If people were married, there was a praise that was offered to those kinds of relationships, regardless of the quality of the relationships, right? Just marriage was the thing. And it's the thing that kind of goes in these certain steps. And then you are supposed to, procreate, you're supposed to have children after this. And kind of it was, I think a lot of it for my family particularly is connected to like this American dream. You move to this country, you've gone through all these things to transition and to emigrate for your children to have this picture of what you see as success. And marriage in that way was part of that. But I don't think that understandings and aspects of love, and again, the depth and the nuance of that was kind of cultivated in a way in which my family could help me understand that and kind of language that. So I learned a lot of that stuff separate from my specific family of origin and my specific kind of culture of origin. I learned that kind of in my own right in terms of my different, friendships that helped me understand different things. So that's why I say kind of the mixed messages of kind of what I saw versus what I heard. And then what I learned elsewhere has led me to where I am in terms of how I view loving relationships, but also how I want to embody loving relationships.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I definitely grew up having marriage put on a pedestal, that was something I was supposed to achieve, and that meant something big for me. And often did think very conservatively about being married to a man and having his babies. And he was supposed to take care of me, was definitely taught to me at a very young age. But I didn't understand like what I was seeing with my mom's marriage and why marriage was so high on the pedestal, because I didn't think the two correlated together. Like it doesn't seem like it's that happy to me. So that was really weird for me. And then not explicitly told to me that my sexuality couldn't be what it is now. And so I definitely didn't give it much consideration or much thought until I was way older and saw like happy examples of people being out and identifying as queer or lesbian or gay or whatever. And so I wanted to see that was a good thing before it was something that I attached to myself, because everywhere else I had known marriage and relationships to be, it was not that. And people weren't happy or they were hiding or something. So very mixed messages for me as well.
Yeah, I feel similar with the theme so far of the mixed messages, and that what both of you were saying, love wasn't so much expressed in the relationships that were existing. In my family, in my more extended family, marriage was actually not so important. What was important was to have a man. It didn't matter what type of man that man was, what he was doing, the quality of this man, just to have a man and then to start having kids. And I know when I was like 23, I was dating someone for some time, and my father's like, when are you going to start having kids? I got a lot of other stuff that's going to happen before some kids are going on. But yeah, so, and then unfortunately, a lot of the relationships in my family, they represent that, where there's women who have children and they don't have any spousal or relational support with that. So that was a part of my message. My parents have been together for 50 years. So they've been together for a very long time. Not always a quality 50 years, but 50 years. So learned about persevering through situations. But I don't know if my experience could have the same sort of perseverance that my parents have had. So similar to what both T and I, Anna, what you're saying is that I had to look and redefine what relationships and love meant for me. And growing up with these ideas of you don't need a man, don't depend on a man, don't rely on a man, you take care of yourself. And I'm like, well, why? Then what am I in a relationship for if we can't have any, if I can't rely on this person, or I can't like openly express love and care for another person? So really having to unlearn a lot of things and find new ways of loving and taking risk and being vulnerable that certainly weren't modeled to me.
the mixed messages, that definitely resonates for me too. And then having to step back, saying, okay, I just got all this information. It's overwhelming. Let me step back and make sense of it for myself. I think an influence in what I saw was marriages, but a lot of divorces, like a lot of divorces, and being, taking from that, like, okay, I'm not sure that any message that's saying that marriage is the be all end all is really going to have much validity for me, considering all the divorces that I've seen. So kind of directly challenging that notion from that. At the same time, I'm a member of a blended family. So seeing my parents' marriage not work out, but my father's second marriage has been quite healthy and successful, and having beautiful sisters that I acquired from that union, that it sort of gave me okay, let me think about this a bit differently, and figure out for myself what's going to work. Like, maybe I'll get married, maybe I won't, but if I do, I'm going to choose someone I feel like I can go the distance with. So I think those are some influences there for me. But I do appreciate in that what I saw around the divorces, it's just sort of a sense of being able to make that decision, as hard as it was, that particularly for the Black women in those relationships, that they had the power within themselves, my mom, to make that decision and do what she thought was best for her own self and for ultimately her children. So, mixed messages, but the things I took from that, I think I've described.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, it's not always figuring out how to navigate in relationships. And I like what you said about that it can be challenging to figure out how to navigate out of a relationship too, but doing that when that relationship is not for us, or that relationship is not healthy for us. So when we think about what is a healthy relationship, what are relationship goals that we feel like Black people, Black families would have? That, I say this over and over, that relationships, they don't have to be hard. Like, they don't have to be hard, but they do take work. So when we're thinking about what that work is and what we want our relationships to look like, what would be some of the goals?
It's funny,
I remember growing up, the Huxtables were always a goal for me. Like the two successful people being together and actually having like family discussions and things like that, and talking about culture and all that. Yeah, that was like my first examples of like what couple kind of goals were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I was thinking about this, I don't have any examples in my immediate community, in terms of thinking back on my childhood or kind of adolescence as examples. Like, yeah, I want that. It just looks right. So a lot of mine were kind of TV examples, and I think a lot of us had the Huxtables, not only in terms of them and kind of the nuclear family, right? That was, again, kind of offered to us and kind of pedestaled, as Tia named, but they lived in Brooklyn, they lived in a brownstone, so it wasn't just about their profession. My family, a lot of my family is from Brooklyn, so also just thinking about that and being able to picture some of that in some ways that felt accessible, and then having this wide range of ages of children, like just kind of the big family, right? So that was also one of my ones that I would have said kind of our relationship goals. But something as I've gotten older, I've actually had this conversation a lot with clients recently, is that the desire for relationships to be more expansive than they are. I think there's been a lot of rigidity that has come from a protective place culturally and historically and politically. But I think that when I see relationships that offer expansion, that offer kind of moving away from the norm to actually engage in what this family dynamic needs. That has been like more of a goal for me. And it's something that, something I was thinking about when you'd asked the first question about, kind of descriptors. I was thinking about what makes Black love to me very special and unique is the expansiveness. Creating family dynamics, creating love dynamics, creating partnerships, not from what we've seen, but from what we have had to do, which is why our relationships oftentimes show up differently. They show up as more egalitarian. They show up as, women identify people in families taking on, certain roles that are different than the traditional, makeup of the nuclear family. And I think that type of expansion, gift and a curse in a way, but when I think about some of the positives from that is that you get to create what you want to experience in a lot of those ways when you are allowed and kind of offer yourself the expansion that says there's no rules for this. We get to do what works for us, and we have to just kind of buffer, right, what we're hearing, kind of what we're taking in from anybody in our community. But the beauty and the autonomy of creating what you want to create that doesn't have to look like the Huxtables, but doesn't, have to look like, something negative, right? But what is it that you can kind of find in between that that actually fits what you want to experience?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Black love is had to be adaptable, and it's had to be expansive, and it's had to be able to change and be fluid by force, but now being able to choose to create the relationships that we want and giving ourselves that space to do that, to find what we want our relationships, what we want our love to look like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something that I think is important is communication, that we have to be able to communicate. And even if it is hard what we have to say, or the other person may not like it, that we have to be able to share with our partner. We have to take that risk to be ourselves and be authentic, because if we don't verbalize it, we're still going to communicate it. It's going to come out in other ways, in our actions and our behaviors, and resentment and bitterness and frustration. So being able to express what we need to express, but communicating is not an easy thing. Like we're talking about the relationships that we saw. I know I didn't see people sitting down and saying, hey, when this happened, I felt this sort of a way. I would prefer for these sort of things to be happening. That wasn't it. But then finding the resources and the ability to have those conversations, because it is so important, which I think too means that we have to remove egos, that we have to remove facades that we carry outside the relationships, not bringing those into relationship, so we can say the things that we need to say. And I also like the idea of it being more than communication as listening and hearing, and being more about comprehension. And once you comprehend, you understand me to do something with it. It's great that you heard me, but now what are you going to do about that? And again, so I think because we do have that cultural familiarity, that our communication doesn't have to look like other people's communication, but we have to figure out within our family, within our culture, what that communication looks like so that we're doing it effectively.
Yeah, I love that. First of all, I feel like I'm absorbing so much. This is great and encouraging. But one of the things that was said earlier about humanity, that really resonated for me in terms of a relationship goal. Like, I want to be human in my relationship. I want my spouse to be human. He's not going to always get it right. I'm not always going to get it right. And especially when I think about, I don't know, somewhat of that armor that we put on as Black folks. We go outside in the world. I know sometimes for me, I'm not always checking and taking that armor off when I come home. And so that humanity of, okay, it's okay to do that, and expecting that, from him, and encouraging that and inviting that as well. Definitely goals, I think, for the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Something that came up for me recently was like the ability for relationships to grow as you grow. Like, you're not the same person that you were when you entered the relationship, and it continues to evolve, and you're not expected to be the same type of person. And that came up for me because I recently started identifying as non-binary. And so having the conversation with my partner, like, what does that mean for our relationship? You know, certain relationships can be defined by terms like lesbian or, you know, queer or whatever. Like, does that, you know, hinder our relationship? Is that something that you feel comfortable with me identifying as, and that we're still together in that way? So that's been very big for me. And also, like, in this relationship, learning how relationships cannot be toxic. And so, like, having situations where there is no drama. But if there were, we could talk about it. But like, getting out of my own head about what could be going on, because, you know, in silence, or, you know, if we haven't talked in this amount of time, like, you know, people have certain issues with that. And so just learning, like, if there's no drama and there's, you know, nothing going on, it's okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, being able to be in a relationship that there's not drama, there's not crisis, there's not being scared or feeling suspicious about what the person's doing, just being able to enjoy them. Yeah.
That makes me think about specifically in my work with Black couples, and when I'm doing my assessment, I talk about stereotypes, right? Of stereotypes that you grew up possibly kind of hearing or understanding about yourself and family, but also stereotypes of whatever your partner's identities are, and how do you think that impacts, right? How you hear them. And it makes me think about my partnership and like stereotypes around Black women being loud or like needing this or needing this, and him oftentimes not knowing what to do with me being like, I don't yell, I don't fight, I'm not interested in none of that. I gotta go to work. I got clients in the morning. Like, I've been in therapy for going on 12 years weekly. Like, we're not in that. But it was something that he had either become so used to or it seen so much, right? So that was how he understood things. And we really had to do a lot of work around like, oh, we could be in disagreement around things and we're still safe. Like, there's not, we don't have to do all this whole like big recon mission, like all this kind of stuff. And that was something that for a while in our relationship, needing to kind of learn that there can still be safety in conflict, right? Depending on how you two act, how you two respond, your insight about each other, all those kinds of things. And it's something that shows up so much in couples when you're bringing in so much stuff from the outside. It really gets in the way of like, is that actually happening here, and what does that mean between us, and does that work for us or not work for us? So T, you just reminded me of, and that connects to what I mean by like that kind of expansiveness, that this could just be that. It doesn't have to be all this other stuff. But are we communicating about that? Are we naming that? And what do we understand about each person's position in any of that?
I mean, I mentioned the Huxtables earlier. Just think about all of the stuff that was highlighted that we may have seen that showed toxic couples and stuff, like, you know, the Martin Gina thing. And that was its own thing. Now that I'm older, I see how bad that was. And like the Jerry Springer relationships that I'm sure we've all seen, and just the plethora of stuff that's out there that shows like people having these very violent and toxic situations. And if you're not like that, like, am I doing something wrong? Or like, is this person happy? You know, there's just so many examples of what I don't want to have, that I don't have enough of what I want to see.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about for myself, and oftentimes with the clients I work with, as this idea of growth and growing, that as you continue to move into your best self, can your relationship sustain you? Will you be sustained in that relationship when you are your best you? And as you're growing, ideally, our relationship's going to be growing as well. But then there are these barriers and these challenges that come up in our growth and our partner's growth and our relational growth. So, what are some of the challenges that you think Black couples face, and then how do we overcome them?
Yeah, I think one thing that we're navigating now, I didn't mention, we have 2 children. They're 19 and 16, so we're staring down the path of college financing, and so I think about things like generational wealth and being able to, you know, navigate, you know, as to Black people. You know, my husband is also from an immigrant family. You know, myself, my you know, my family's highly educated, et cetera, you know, but if I still think about our, like, what we have to draw from, you know, that it can be challenging at times. I think about big goals that we have for ourselves and our children, and I do think that that's culturally bound, at least for our experience. Thankfully, you know, shared values around education, work ethic, et cetera, you know, we're you know, feel really proud of myself and him and, you know, what we've achieved. But I also recognize, okay, there are some systemic barriers that we've experienced when it comes to finances. So that's just a thought, even at our, like, I don't know, our education level, et cetera. You know, I'm just sort of really dealing with that right now, looking at our kids, and as we talk about, okay, who's going to go to what schools and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think one I have is learning how to be interdependent and not like hyper independent. And so we've done so much for ourselves, and to get out of survival mode has been a challenge. Allowing each other to help each other and to take off the armor that we carry with us every day.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that. So my mother definitely was a superwoman and did literally everything, including working, taking care of the kids, doing the homework, doing hair, for making meals, taking people here as best as she could, focusing on what your emotional needs are. And again, I internalize those messages of, you don't depend on a man for anything. My spouse, his mother was very much that superwoman too, where she was taking care of the kids and working and taking care of the home, doing all those things. So I think we probably both had expectations for me to be a superwoman. And then after getting married, realizing I don't want to be a superwoman. So I think that was a struggle for us. The expectations that I initially held for myself, and then in my growth, not wanting to take on all of that, and him having these ideas about what I was supposed to be doing or what I was going to be doing. So again, in terms of then that growth of once I was able to identify what was going on with me, and then having to communicate that that's not actually the life that I desire. So how are we going to navigate around this space differently? Because we both live in this house and we're both going to take care of kids, and I'm not going to be up till midnight cleaning. So the vulnerability to be able to adapt and adjust for myself, but then also for him to look at his ideas of masculinity and make those changes, was a challenge, and certainly still pops up for us, but something that we are having to continue to navigate through.
Something that I was thinking about, and I was trying to figure out how to language it before this, but the only word that was coming to my mind was like safety and security, and something that I think is a unique challenge that Black couples face is the understanding or the knowing about the lack of safety outside of the home, and I think that creates a lot of pressure to have certain experiences with each other. So I'm thinking about a lot of my couples work, and I'm thinking a lot about the research, and even like my own relationship. There's typically like a heightened just sense of anxiety just around safety and around like, hey, when you leave the house, I need to know here, here, and here. That's regardless of maybe city that you might be in, or it can also be tied regionally, but I don't think we talk enough about the impact of that, right? And the labor and how that affects needs and kind of demands for certain kinds of security and safety in relationships. I see what happens with a lot of Black couples that I work with is that because they're holding so much from the outside world under the gaze of whiteness and all that, that when they are with their partners, there are oftentimes higher expectations. I just need this to be chill and cool. I don't need no problems here, right? Because there's so much going on out there. I got so much on my back out there. I need, and we see it online, right? You need to be his peace, all this other kind of stuff. Like, you just need to be, right? I need this to be a cool, calm, collected space. I don't want to have to do work here. I don't want to have to think about this. I don't want to have to be in my P's and Q's here. I do, enough shucking and jiving out there. And I think that there is a tension that can oftentimes bring into relationships that I think isn't talked about enough to be able to engage in some empathy and some, shared experience around like, oh, this is not us, right? This is the impact, and how do we kind of find this kind of joint way to collaborate so that we can navigate this in a different way. But there are just all these unnamed internalized pressures that I think really do shift and increase the need for Black people in romantic relationships that I think that I wish was talked about a bit more and kind of honored in that way more, that, yeah, we do have different needs. Let's meet them. Let's figure out if we can meet them, at least.
You are talking exactly about what I was thinking. I have that challenge intersectionally because my partner does not feel the same way I do about the whole safety thing. Because not only am I a Black woman, I'm also a queer woman. And so I'm more masculine presenting. And so I'm constantly thinking about space and how I look and what I give off and whether or not I feel okay. But then also like traveling as a Black person or traveling as a queer Black person, like, what does that look like? Is this okay in this town? Is it okay in this country? Like, I think about that all the time, and she really does not. So it's very interesting when we talk about like how we consider these things. She's like, no, not really. I don't really think like that. And it's not a problem, but I'm definitely more of that safety protection mindset.
Yeah, and even when it's not a relationship issue per se, still that racism, sexism, that gender racism, it still has an impact on us. So not even about the relationship, but being out in the world where we are under this white supremacy, that we do have higher blood pressure, we may be more hypervigilant, we have higher rates of diabetes, there's more IBS issues. So it's not a relationship issues, but our health absolutely will impact our relationship. If I don't feel well enough to do things that we enjoy, or I'm chronically ill, or my mortality is at risk. And I even think, Michelle, what you were saying, like financially, if I'm not physically healthy, what does that mean for my family? That oppression impacts us internally, even if it's not a relationship issue per se. We still have to tackle it or address it in the relationship, because it is going to come into the home.
And I know it's not allowed, but if I could put a chip in him, just so I know where you are at all times and I know who's around, I would like to do that. But I know that's that thing gets into, that's an attachment style maybe. But like those kinds of things are what I think about. It's just like, that is about me thinking about safety. I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about the world and you. And those are things that he does not hold. He's got male privilege to where he's just like, I'm good in any hood. And I'm just like, all right. But
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Ayanna, when you said tension, right? Because we can be holding that tension and not speaking to it, and or able to even identify what it is, but it's so real and there, and affecting the relationship dynamic. So I appreciate what both you shared about that, and Tia, what you said about that too. It's just something, just to really try to find a way in my relationship to communicate and talk about that, right? How important that is.
And one, I love to grow and build and overcome these mixed messages and have that strong communication and really use that expansiveness and flexibility and adaptability well. When is a good time for Black couples to go to counseling, and what would they be looking for in a couples therapist?
need to go earlier than they have been. They're a little, little bit sooner. And I specialize in working with couples, and more specifically, Black couples. So I will, and that's in general for couples, but more specifically with Black couples, getting in sooner. You can, enter counseling when you are dating. You do not need to be married. You do not need to be engaged. Oftentimes there are rules around having to be like serious enough. And I see that actually from the client population and from even clinicians saying that, hey, I won't work with anybody who's not at this kind of stage or phase of their relationship. I was like, well, how do we shore them up to get there if we don't meet with them a little bit sooner to help them get there? But I think it's very important for Black clients, when they are seeking couple care, to be able to meet with somebody who can kind of contextualize their relationship and contextualize the intersections, right, as Tia was naming, and how that plays a role in your relationship. Yes, look for somebody who specializes in your communication concerns, or if it's infidelity, or if there's addiction or things like that. But what does it mean for them to actually see you and to be able to hold all of your identities in relation to what is going on with your partner, what's going on in the relation, kind of what your needs are. And I think that therapists who see couples, unfortunately, we still have a long way to go, right, in terms of that skill in contextualizing, the empathy in that kind of contextualizing, and being able to kind of name it as it comes up, even in the therapeutic relationship. But I think that is paramount for me in terms of being able for clients to be able to try to assess for that quicker and kind of sooner than later. I think is really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in individual counseling, there's that cultural mistrust in coming to therapy, and rightly so, because we have been hurt and harmed by mental health professionals. So it can take us longer to get into individual therapy. And then in terms of couples work, that how we want to protect ourselves individually, I think that's even doubled in relationships, wanting to protect our relationship. I know looking for our own couples therapist, it was really important that I was going to feel safe talking about being in a Black relationship, having a Black family, because there's so much judgment and stigma around Blackness, that I need to feel that my therapist culturally would understand these things, and that was going to be safe for me to say what I need to say without it being a representation of the demise of Black relationships or couples. So I think it's important that we find therapists that we feel comfortable with, and they may be culturally similar or dissimilar to us, but we have to feel safe within that. And definitely agree, Ayanna, that the sooner that we go, the better, that it's fine to get premarital counseling. And if we are getting counseling earlier, it is setting us up to do that work that we need to do throughout the course of our relationship. And also when we go earlier, that we don't have to wait for significant problems to come up, because we can have greater comfort in this issue. We need to address it before it becomes a crisis or a trauma in the relationship.
I was just thinking, I'm not sure that the media does couples therapy, any any favors, kind of back to what we were saying about like drama and just, all kinds of toxicity. Unfortunately, I think that's a barrier that couples therapists have to overcome. It's like, well, no, it's not like that in real life, or good couples therapy shouldn't be like that in real life. So, just think about those kinds of things. For myself, I mostly do individual or group. Couples I find to be particularly taxing, but I understand that part of that is part of my therapeutic style, use of self, and so I get in pretty deep. So I tend to only work with one or two couples at a time when I am doing it. It's been years. But that being said, I just really looking for a good fit, and both partners have to feel that comfort. And it's hard, maybe hard to speak to that if it's imbalanced, or both parties aren't feeling safe, and how to speak to that, or having that goes back to the communication in the couple. If they're unable to kind of talk about that. So those are just some thoughts I'm having as we explore this part of the conversation.
I've never really been the biggest fan of wanting to do couples therapy, not for myself, but like actually the work of the therapist. Because learning that in school, I was like, there's no way. I don't want to do this at all. It's already allowed to talk to one person, and now you're prioritizing the relationship. No, I don't want to do all that. But I think as soon as possible, as often as possible, I think is good. It's always like trying to explain to someone why they should see a therapist is like any other bodily function. Like you go to a doctor to make sure you're physically healthy. You go to these other specialists to make sure that party's healthy. So you're going to make sure your relationship's healthy. Like it's all good. I appreciate the work that other people do.
Well, speaking of working with Black couples, as rewarding as it is working with individuals, and Ayanna, you might agree with this, it's so fabulous to see Black couples just growing and healing and connecting and developing this intimacy that they didn't even know they were capable of doing. That, when couples work is working and people are doing what they need to do, it is really wonderful and beautiful seeing how those relationships grow and change. Yeah. Well, as we are wrapping up, just because I was trying to think of like, well, who are models of relationships that we might be striving to or that we can look at? I'm just curious for each of you, when you think about healthy relationships, what comes to mind for you? And when I was thinking about it, I thought of the Obamas. And I know like during that presidency, I was like, please don't let any love children pop out of this. Please, no. I think about the Obamas, and I thought, LeBron James and his family. They appear that they have things working out for them.
I like the way they handle conflict with the outside world.
Mm-hmm.
But those are two good ones for real. I would say for me, there's a guy that I watch on YouTube. His channel is Belief in Fatherhood. And I think the relationship him and his wife showed to other people is really good. At first I couldn't think of anybody, but the two you mentioned were good. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of sad. Like nobody comes to mind like right off the bat. What is that?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was gonna say, that there's a scarcity, right? I can't kind of, pick out of a hat and just have, 5 to 10 names, whether they be celebrities, whether they be on social media. There are a lot more family like lifestyle pages and kind of platforms like that, and can't even really think about any of them. But I think it's also because I'm a psychologist and I'm just like, hey, people show you what they want. I don't know your business. I'm not trying to make any assumptions about whichever it is. Michelle Obama been talking a lot more about things that have been going on in that marriage. I'm just like, yeah, we love Obama, but they had some stuff, right? Where she was just like, listen, sir. So I can appreciate that marriage more in terms of them being able to talk more about the reality of, yes, it looks like this, but that also means that we had to do a different kind of work right on the back end to be able to still kind of function, publicly in this way. So I think relationships that show up more realistic in that way are relationships I would lean towards and appreciate or admire in that way, in terms of that level of honesty and or transparency, but also looking at respect. I think oftentimes for Black couples in the media, it's like, yeah, we fix our crowns over here, right? But don't make this kind of public mess of things. But again, we don't have a lot of those that have made it kind of far into the public. So you talking about LeBron and Savannah, that was a good one. I wouldn't have even thought about them, but I'm gonna them.
Did y'all watch the Black Love series?
Yes. I haven't seen all the episodes though, but yes.
Not some of them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was a lot of conversation in the last, couple seasons about how this is like struggle love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That could be a whole nother conversation about some themes across that show and platform. Yes, let's talk. But yes.
I haven't seen it. Would y'all recommend it?
Yes, I would still recommend it because I really love kind of showing that kind of vast array of narratives of relationships and love, and just being able to see it and to hear what people have gone through. But I think that because it is entertainment, it also will have a certain lean. So Struggle Love brings people in, so they're going to show a lot more of that stuff. So I think if you can tease that apart, I think you can learn a lot about some of those relationships.
Yeah.
If you're in that true love, struggle love, developing love, moving out of love, therapy can be an excellent
anyway.
for you. And learning more about how to work with Black couples, we definitely encourage any mental health professional to check out a handbook on counseling African American women. Thank you so much thank you very much, Ayanna. But thanks everyone for coming in today and sharing your experiences of Black love. And there'll be more about each of the presenters in the bio or the comments. Love everybody. Thank you.